welcome back to another episode of General Conference Conversations, the podcast where we have conversations about General Conference. I'm your host, Kaylin, and I'm super excited to be here with you studying the words of Christ's chosen leaders. So let's get right into it. Today we are discussing Elder Gong's talk labeled just called Ministering. That's just the whole title. And that's really what it's all about. So I'm excited to talk about it. So, as always, I encourage you to listen to and or read this talk on your own individually before you come and listen to me talk about it, so that you can get your own insights and inspiration and questions that time around, and then maybe I can add something to it. But I'm gonna jump right in. Like I said, it's pretty straightforward. It's all about ministering, and Elder Gong starts by, he shares a couple of stories from some people that he and his wife met in October conference of last year, and some stories also of like close friends that they know, or people that they met during the pandemic, or just during their time, during his time as an apostle. And I really loved this just little one sentence paragraph that he has at the very beginning of his talk, kind of in between some of these stories. He says this: "As followers of Jesus Christ, we seek to minister to others as he would, because lives are waiting to change." And I thought that was really a very simple way and beautiful way to say that, to talk about ministering. And just, I don't know, like, I'm not sure how to like convey my feelings about that. Just one sentence: we minister to others as Christ would, because lives are waiting to change. I think about, in my own life, people who have ministered to me and have changed my life, or impacted my life. My husband and I recently moved to a new state, a new ward, a new state, like far away from where we were living before. And we didn't really know anybody. He knew a couple of people, his grandparents had lived in this ward, and so we have some connections in that way, but personally we didn't know anybody. And I believe it was our first week here, and I can't remember if we had been to church yet. We must have been to church that Sunday, so it must have been like 10 days after we got here. Our neighbor, who is also in our ward, she stopped by. Well, she texted me, and then she stopped by and told me about a Relief Society activity that was happening that night, and invited me to go, and also like promised that she would sit with me the whole time, so that I had somebody that I knew to like sit and talk to. And I very much debated whether I should go or not, because I don't do well with new people and new social situations. I have social anxiety, and so it's really hard for me to just show up at a new ward. At least when I went to church, I had my husband with me, and so I had somebody who I did know. But the thought of going to a Relief Society activity where I literally knew no one was really terrifying. But I did. My husband was like, "You should go, you should meet people." And because she had said that, because she had said, "I will sit with you the whole time, like, don't worry, I'll make sure that you that you can hang out with me, and you'll know somebody, you'll have somebody that you can spend time with." I think that's honestly the only reason I went. If she had just invited me, maybe I still would have gone, because she did like go out of her way to come to our house, but it was just really, and I went and I spent a lot of time with her. It was, what was it that night? They were doing like an auction thing, like a silent auction, or no, it was like a swap meet. So you brought stuff and then you could go and look at stuff and see, and take what you wanted. So I was able to help her like bring all of her stuff in, and it just like, and I sat with her the whole time, and she introduced me to people, and asked more about me, and I got to know her a little bit better. And since then, she's been a great friend to us. I currently serve with her in the Young Women's Presidency. She's the president and I'm the secretary, and I adore serving with her because she is so sweet and so kind. And so and I know that I can go to her. I mean, it's really nice that she's literally my neighbor. She lives right down the street. But like, it's been nice to have somebody that I know. And she's come up, but she's talked to me she comes over and talks to us at sacrament meeting all the time. And I mean, now of course I serve with her, so I see her at least once or twice a week. And anyway, it's just, but I will never forget her coming over that very first time and inviting me and sitting with me and loving me and making me feel welcome and loved and served. And that is ministering to me. Like, I don't think anybody assigned her to do that. Even if they did, I think she would have just done that herself, because that's just who she is. She's such a service-oriented person. But it wasn't like I was assigned as her ministering sister, right? She wasn't assigned to minister to me. She just knew somehow that I was new, and that I would maybe not know that I didn't know there was a relief society activity. I think we had Sunday school that first Sunday, and so I didn't know that it was happening. And then I wouldn't know anybody. And so she, went out of her busy day to come and invite me, and then to follow through and sit with me and like make sure I was okay. And seriously, I will never forget that. And I've had a lot of experiences. There's a younger couple that we've gotten to know fairly well, who has a little boy, and I don't remember exactly how we met them. Like, I don't remember the first meeting we had with them, but we ended up sitting in their pew, and it was just them and their little boy. And my husband loves their little boy and their son, and he loves Ashton, and he loves me, and he is just so cute. He'll just like come over and show us his toys. And so we've been sitting with them in their pew, and just that, it's been like, that's a big thing, is that I have somebody to sit with, which is so funny, but it is. And they ask how we're doing, and it's not like we're like best friends. I don't see her every day, but I know that if I ever needed something, I could ask her, and that was really cool. There was even one Sunday last year, my husband was out of town, and I was kind of like I was not looking forward to going to church by myself, just in general. But I sat with them, and it was just the woman and her son. Her husband wasn't there, and so it was just the three of us. But her son came over, and she gave me some fruit snacks, and we sat together, and I hung out with her son. And it was just so, like, it was such a testament to me that, like, God knows me, and he knows that I need stuff like that. I need reminders that I'm not alone. And he knew that day was gonna be hard for me, but like, I had somebody to sit with. I wasn't completely alone. So I just love that the pure, simple definition of ministering is to reach out to people and to love them the way that they need to be loved. And it's going to look different for everybody. And that's kind of this whole talk, right? Is he's sharing all these very different experiences, very different stories of how people came to find the gospel in the first place, or to be supported by members of the church during hard times, during faith crises. Like, they're all very different, and the way that they were ministered to is very different. And he has a quote he quotes, well, part of this is from James, and part of this is from the Doctrine and Covenants. And he says this: "Pure religion and undefiled is this, to visit the fatherless and the widows, succor the weak, lift up the hands which hang down, and strengthen the feeble knees." And it just speaks for itself, right? As pure religion, pure undefiled religion. And that's the difference between spirituality and like having faith in God and having an organized religion. It's the organized part that we have an organization, that we have callings and we have assignments, and that's in an organized way that everybody kind of knows what's going on, and that our service is organized, and like whatever. I told this story before, but it's one of my favorite memories from my mission, and I think it applies here too. This was, we were still, we were like 4 months into COVID, 4 months into the pandemic, and we had just been told that we could go into members' homes again, into people's homes again. We weren't allowed to go into people's homes for about 4 or 5 months. And so if we were invited, we could go over to members' homes. We couldn't just go and show up at somebody's house, right? So, but that meant we could do member dinners again in their house. We did a lot of member lessons, which was so amazing. And it was so nice to be back in people's homes and to be able to like leave our house and leave our church buildings. But we were also told we could start doing service projects again, like group service projects. We've been doing service during the pandemic because sometimes there wasn't really anything else to do. So like my companions and I, in my last area, we were making hats for the homeless shelter. So like the stake service coordinator had a bunch of yarn in those hat looms that we would go and we'd trade out yarn with her every couple of weeks, and we'd sit and watch like the Book of Mormon videos or General Conference. We did a lot with General Conference, and we'd sit and make those, and then she would take them to the homeless shelters. And so we had been doing little service projects like that, but not, as a zone or as a district, not with a lot of other missionaries, because we weren't supposed to gather. So we got a new service coordinator for the mission, a just serve coordinator specifically, which is really cool. And we got a call from her. Our zone leaders got a call from her one day and said, "Hey, we need a whole zone of missionaries to come and help." And there was this neighborhood in our zone area I had never served in, but it was in our zone, and there was an empty lot on the street that the house had been torn down, and then there was like where the basement had been, I believe, or at least like where the foundation, there was a big pit in the ground basically, and the people of the street had been like wanting and begging the city to clean it up because homeless people had started living there and using it, and people had just started dumping their garbage. Like we pulled out like carpets, and just like there was a grocery cart in there, like just dump. It was gross and it was nasty. And so the people on the street, the people in that neighborhood had been begging the city and they hadn't done anything about it. And so finally they had talked to like a police officer who had talked to another police officer who was like, oh, well, the missionaries could help and they won't charge anything. They'll do it all for free. And so they got in touch with our service coordinator and she got in touch with us. And we showed up. They had gotten the roll-off dumpster and they had a police officer there to kind of oversee us, make sure we did everything right. We didn't do anything wrong. And I think it took us about 2 hours. There were probably 16 missionaries, 20 missionaries in all. It took us about 2 hours to get as much out there as we possibly could, and we could have done more actually, but there was a couple like big pieces that our zone leader had gone to talk to the police officer, and he was just standing there and he was like, okay, we're just gonna like try and get these last couple of things out. I think we're gonna be done. Is there anything else you want us to do? And he was like, no, you've done so much more than we thought you were going to be able to do. Like you've gone above and beyond. That is, you're good. You're good. And somebody on the street brought us popsicles. And I got to wear the helping hands vests, the yellow helping hands vests. And a couple of people on the street came over to thank us. Like, thank you so much. This has been so long coming, a long time coming, and we're so grateful that you've taken time out of your day to come and help us. And like, obviously that's doable outside of an organized religion. That's doable outside of an organization. But it's easier when you already have that organization. You have service coordinator, right, who can call his own leader, who can call his missionaries and say, yep, be at this place at this time on Friday or whatever, and get it done. Because of course many hands make light work. With so many of us there, it didn't take us very long. And so anyway, the organized and organized religion is very, very important. But that is our duty, is to visit the fatherless and widows, to succor the weak, to lift up the hands which hang down, and to strengthen the feeble knees. We need each other. Whatever context that might look like, inside or outside of religion. Whether it's my neighbor who is, atheist, or my best friend who doesn't want to talk about church, or whatever, right? We need each other as people to be human. That is, we are not put on this earth to be alone. Why do you think that God organized us into families and into communities? And it's so important to have people and to ask for help as well. That's a really hard thing to do, is to ask for help. I had my ministering sister texted me the other day, and it was so sweet. I need to get back to her about when we can actually meet up. She was like, I know it's hard to make friends in this town sometimes. I'm having a hard time making friends. I'd love to get to know you better. And I'm sure that was really hard for her to say, I need help, because she's the one that's ministering to me, right? I'm not the one ministering to her. But I was so grateful that she said that, and I was like, oh, I'm not a burden. Like, I'm helping you too. It's mutually beneficial, right? We need each other. Anyway, he also talks about, I really loved this, there was an elders quorum president in Hong Kong that they met who talked about, he said, we do not check boxes, we minister to the ministers who care for our people. And I also love that too. Sometimes I feel like, everybody should be having people that they minister to, but everybody also should have people that minister to them. And I just had I'm really terrible at ministering. You have no idea, so terrible at ministering. But I had my first ministering interview a couple months ago, and my Relief Society president was very understanding. She was like, it's totally okay, like, you don't have to be perfect at it. And then she asked how I was doing, and Like, I have great ministering sisters. Like I just said, I talk to her at least every couple of weeks. She texts me and asks how I'm doing. She brought flowers to me the other day, which made me really happy. But it was also nice to be checked in with, again, kind of a, how are you? How's life? How's your husband? How's whatever? How are you settling in? And even though we've been here for a year, but like, how are you settling in? Because sometimes I still don't feel settled here. But I also just love that, like, we minister to the ministers who take care of our people. And I think that's important. Sometimes we look at somebody who seems strong in the gospel, who seems strong in the church, who you think would never stray, who you think their life is perfect, right? Well, we talked about that last episode with Elder Carl B. Cook's talk. He shared that story of that woman who was in a Relief Society, and the teacher she perceived her to be perfect, had this like perfect life, and she just could not sit there while she felt so imperfect, so she left. And I feel like that happens a lot. We look at people in the church and we think that they're perfect, their faith is perfect. Nobody is perfect. And I guess we just need to be aware of that, and aware that, it's okay to struggle, and it's important to also check in with the people who you think are perfect, who I think are doing just great. Like, everybody needs to be checked in on. Anyway, okay, so he shares a few more. This is really all stories, so I'm not gonna like read a whole lot of stuff, because they really are just a bunch of stories that, not just a bunch of stories, but a lot of different stories that I think you should read on your own time to just hear about them. But he talks about young men and young women being given opportunities to minister. He says, please give our young men and young women needed opportunity to accompany and be mentored by experienced ministering brothers and sisters, and please let our young rising generation inspire ministering brother and sister companions. And so, as I've said, I'm in the Young Women presidency. I'm the secretary, and we've had a lot of discussions about that, about having the young women be more involved in ministering. Some of them have assignments and some of them don't, but it is important. Like, that's a change. Part of the reason I'm so bad at ministering is that I never got into the habit of it. They changed it to ministering from visiting and home teaching. Let's see, how old was I? It was right before my mission. It was a year before I left on my mission. They changed it to ministering. So I was just barely a young adult, or a young single adult. I think it was a couple months before I turned 20. And I'd never had a visiting or home teaching assignment before, and they changed it to ministering. And then my Relief Society president asked me, probably 6 months later, do you want to have a ministering assignment? And I was very honest with her. I was in the middle of putting in all of my mission papers, and I wasn't sure when I was going to be leaving. And so I told her that. I was like, I don't know when I'm going to be leaving my mission, and I don't want to have you like assign me somebody and then have to leave in 2 months or whatever, right? Maybe that was the wrong decision, but I was also just very overwhelmed with like missions and everything, and she completely understood. And then I was a missionary, and so I didn't have ministering assignments as a missionary. And then when I got home, it was still pretty like COVID-y. we didn't have church. And then I moved, and then I moved again, and I got married. And so like I've had ministering assignments since then. I've had them since my mission. I've had a couple. But I just have never been in the habit of actually like doing that and everything. And so I think having that habit kind of start as a young woman, having the experience, also if they are deciding to go on a mission, to have the experience of going and talking to people, to be mentored by, older people in the ward, to be paired with those people. And I love at the end he says, and please let our young rising generation inspire ministering brother and sister companions. That we are also learning. There's so much we can learn from the youth. So I just echo that. I think it's very important to involve the youth in, I loved bringing youth along to appointments as a missionary, having their testimony and having, and hearing them bear their testimony is very, very powerful. So, So yes, he kind of pleads with us to be better at ministering, and he gives this analogy with the vineyard in the Book of Mormon, Jacob 5. He says this, inspired ministering blesses families and individuals. It also strengthens wards and branches. Think of your ward or branch as a spiritual ecosystem. In the spirit of the Book of Mormon, allegory of the olive trees, the Lord of the vineyard and his servants bring forth precious fruit and strengthen each tree by binding together the strengths and weaknesses of all the trees. The Lord of the vineyard and his servants repeatedly ask, what more can I do? Together they bless hearts and homes, wards and branches through inspired, consistent ministering. And I love that because, there are a lot of ways to interpret the allegory of the vineyard in Jacob 5. And make sure I'm actually saying the right chapter. Yes, okay. I am saying the right chapter. But I also love that our wards and branches, and that also includes, not just members, but also non-members, and to minister and to ask, what more can I do? And that's kind of, I want to read his last kind of invitation, plea, kind of at the very end. He says, wherever we are in this Easter season, let us reach out and care as our Savior would, especially to those whom we are privileged by love and assignment to minister. And I love that he says love and assignment. Yes, we have people who we are assigned to minister to in our wards, but there are also people who are around us who we can just minister to because they're important to us, or because they're people and we can love them and support them, our neighbors, our friends, even people who don't live around us, right? We can minister to them. And so that's my question for you, is how can you minister to those around you? And I've talked about this before, and it's gonna be a theme for this season. I can feel it. I've already said it in every episode I've done so far. Work smarter, not harder. That is my motto for life in general, and it's something that is very important for me, and it's like something that I'm very passionate about. And I don't think this needs to be a work harder plea. Maybe it is. I think it's a work harder plea for me. I don't do ministering. I need to actually do my ministering, right? But also, if you're already ministering, what else can you do? What can you do differently? Or maybe you're already doing everything that you think you can be doing. That's okay too. But I've talked about this with regards to studying and things like that, or going to the temple or whatever. Sister Corden talked in her talk about intention. There's a difference between going to sacrament meeting and just sitting there and worshiping in sacrament meeting, or worshiping in the temple rather than just going. And like the just going is good, but even if you do something different, maybe you don't have the time to go more times to the temple, right? But when you do go, you go with intention. And that might be something that you can put towards ministering as well. Ministering is so interesting to me. It's one of those things that we have changed, that President Nelson has changed since he's become prophet. And it's another one of those things that channels that hear him, personal relationship, personal revelation idea, theme that President Nelson has had in his prophetship, his time of being a prophet. That it's not as rigidly, like, it's not laid out exactly what you should do, right? You're supposed to have contact with him, right? And then you talk to it's the same thing as home teaching and visiting teaching. It's the same concept. You're assigned to a person or a family, and then once every 3 months, every quarter, you have an interview, ministering interview. It's just called something different, and they don't do like, oh, you saw somebody? Cool, right? It's not as much of a checklist. It's how you had contact with these people. How are they doing? And that's really powerful, and that's how they presented it when they first changed it too, right? It's less of a checklist. It's not just go over and read a message out of the ensign. It's your contact can be just texting or calling, especially if it's that person, that's what they want. That's all that they're comfortable with, is a phone call or a text. When I first met my ministering sisters, they asked that. They're like, would that be something that you're comfortable with, a visit from us? Or do you want to just keep it like over the phone or seeing each other at church? And I was really appreciative of that, because it's stressful to host in your home. It's stressful to have people in your home. It's stressful to have everything looking, that it's not dirty and messy and whatever. And so it's just something different. It really is just something different. It looks a little bit different. So that's my question for you. How can you minister to those around you? And not just people that you minister to, but your family, your friends, your neighbors, old friends that you only interact with on Facebook and Instagram. How can you minister to them? And that's what is ministering. It is to succor the weak, lift up the hands which hang down, and strengthen the feeble knees. To love people where they're at and what they need. So that's all I've got for you for the talk part of it. So question, of course, again, one question: how can you minister to those around you? Further reading, this one I literally just said, pay attention to footnotes, because there were quite a few footnotes. I'm trying to find the ones that I was talking about. Especially with the stories, he has kind of footnotes about like where he met them, and even some more background on people and kind of things like that, which I thought were interesting to read. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. As I said, I think because there were so many footnotes that had stuff that I didn't list out specific footnotes. He also has a couple of like hymns that he references, and a bunch of scriptures as well. Anyway, so yes, pay attention to footnotes especially if there's like a specific story that resonates with you or scripture that resonates with you. Find those in the footnotes and study further on those. And there's 2 talks. There's a talk and a Rick's College devotional, which is not Rick's College anymore. Strive to be Temple Worthy by L. Tom Perry. the Rick's College Devotional, September of 1989. He has the link for that in that footnote, or at least like where you can find that. And then Ministering by President Nelson, the April 2018 General Conference. That's when he announced the ministering change. Was his very first conference as prophet, which is pretty crazy. Yeah, so if you're looking for something else to study further, those are good resources, and I'll put those in the show notes as well. But that's all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for listening and or watching this episode, and I hope to see you next time. Be sure to follow me. I'm on Facebook and Instagram at General Conference Conversations. And if you like the show, please subscribe, like, comment here on YouTube, and subscribe, follow, whatever it is on your podcatcher of choice. Leave reviews, tell your friends. I really appreciate it. I can talk to more people, have conversations with more people. It's really exciting. And yeah, I'll talk to you next time.